Hey guys, got an exciting new project coming up and I really need to get this guy off my workbench. Now the reason it's been on my workbench for so long is because it had consecutive failures and I left it set up here for a few weeks while I played games on it, left it running just to make sure that the last repair finally did the job, and it seems to have done the trick just fine. This machine, as you can see, it's still running and it's been about a month now since the last repair, so winner winner chicken dinner. So what is it? Well, this is a Concord's XT286. Now this is an XT class machine with a 286 processor, and it wasn't a bad idea at the time. They was advertised as an AT for an XT price, and it's quite a logical solution. It wasn't really until the 90s where you started having Microsoft Windows that you really needed a 386 or later a 486 and extended memory and all that sort of stuff. For a DOS PC, a Turbo XT was perfectly suitable, and if you were to just take that CPU out and shove in something a little bit quicker, you've got a pretty decent business machine. And that's what this machine originally was. It originally shipped with Hercules monochrome, and I can read the specs out here. It had 1 meg of RAM, 20 meg hard drive, and the 2 floppy drives. And the reason that I can read it is because the original owner, for some reason, I have no idea why, thought it was a good idea to etch the system specs into the top of the case. Absolutely beautiful. So, anyway, when you went out and you bought your AT for an XT price, you probably expected a few AT features that an XT wouldn't have. And the way Concord dealt with this was through expansion cards. So, we have a 1.2 meg high density floppy drive that is provided by a high density floppy card that's designed for an XT. It's got a special BIOS in it that has support for the high density drive. They added a real-time clock card so that the machine wouldn't forget the time and date. They added a disk cache to help with disk performance. That's built in ROM. And that was just to help with disk performance because you're running on an 8-bit bus. Although that was rubbish, it was causing me issues with software crashing, and it was actually slower to use than just a decent MFM controller. So I've now removed that, but it's an example of some of the things they did to step it up without any extra cost. Now, one thing from owning these machines is I do get a very cheap feel. Parts tend to fail. The high density floppy controller I ended up pulling out of this machine because it did really weird things and had issues and conflicts with other cards. They certainly built this on a budget. Now the motherboard is actually from an American company called Wavemate that were commonly known for some of their earlier non-PC machines. It does have a very Taiwan feel, so I'm not sure if it was made in America or not, but it's definitely an American company, and it says made in the USA on the board, so perhaps it was. But it does have a very Taiwan feel to it. As for other features, what else has this machine got? One thing it doesn't have is extended memory, and that's just not even an option on the system, which does mean it's kind of awkward for Windows. However, of course, Windows wasn't out. Windows 3 and Windows 3.1 and all that wasn't out when this machine was new, so it wasn't really an issue back then. But I am tempted to put in an EMS board because that'll make Windows 3.0 a lot more usable. I'd be able to actually put things like Microsoft Word and other applications on it if I had an expanded memory board. Not that you need it to run those programs, but it wouldn't be much fun to use with only 640k. Whatever happens to the 384 up top, I don't know. It doesn't appear in an EMS page frame. Extended memory managers just crashed the machine, so not completely sure. One other thing they did to improve performance was they took AMD's 8MHz 286 CPU and they ran it at an impressive 10MHz, so it's actually a factory overclocked machine. And when I run this thing through programs like Checkit and Norton System Information and run the little benchmark tools, the CPU performance actually comes out really high. It's 6.4, somewhere around there, times the speed of an IBM PC XT, and Norton System Information also suggested that it would beat an IBM AT. And I will have to say, from using this system, I do think it is actually faster than the IBM AT. I would say for games and that sort of stuff, it's probably about on par with that PS2 Model 3286 that I showed a while ago. But yeah, so that pretty much covers that. The noise you hear, so I've got a 75 meg Maxter drive in this, which is a big, full height, massive drive, and I know the internet will tell you that flames will come out and the noise will bleed your ears, but it's actually not true. You get one of these drives with a good bearing, they're actually relatively quiet, and this one's silent. The noise that you can hear is actually the second fan, because this machine does have a second fan installed. Now what I thought was really bizarre, and I have seen this in other XT cases, is the fan mounting isn't below the hard drive, which is the hottest device. It is not at the front of the case where it might blow air in. to get sucked out again. I think that would have been great. Now that they put it under the bottom floppy drive. So the device that is the most susceptible to dust now has air blowing into it. I'm not sure if the engineer that came up with those ideas is still employed, but yeah, and it's a very loud fan, that's what the hum is you can hear. I also upgraded it to EGA, as you can see. We're using a lovely NEC multi-sync. So anyway, let's have a look at the repair. So what happened? Well, I pulled it out of storage, hooked it up to my system, turned it on, and got the black screen of death. The dead motherboard syndrome, the no beeps, the no text on the screen, nothing situation. Now this is quite common on XT class computers because of one particular peculiarity, and that's that they don't communicate through the speaker or the screen if the base memory is broken. So basically if bank 0 is broken, they won't even start. Now on this machine, because that RAM is arranged in a 16-bit configuration, that meant that if any of the first half meg of the RAM chips were faulty, it's a no-go. Okay, so the first thing I do, this is just to check that the machine's actually starting up partially, is to check the row address strobe pin on the RAM. This is pin 4 of most basic ICs. If we see a pulse, we know the CPU is actually starting up and doing a few things and getting some timers ready. You can also use an oscilloscope if that's what you've got handy. As you can see here, I'm just hitting reset, and that's what the pin should look like if the basics of the motherboard are actually starting up. So the next thing to do is actually to write out the Supersoft Diagnostics ROMs. You'll be able to find these online, and I might do a more in-depth video at a later date. This is my programmer. It's not one I personally recommend. I'm going to look at trying out a few different ones. So then it was just a case of inserting the ROMs in the machine, dropping in a Hercules monochrome graphics card and a PC speaker, and powering the system up and seeing what we got from the Supersoft screen. So as you can see, this motherboard isn't completely dead. The ROMs have started. And straight away we can see we've got memory errors in our base 16 kilobytes, which is the minimum the system really needs to actually turn on and do anything. So the first thing to do is to start replacing those RAM chips. We use a little message in the bottom right hand corner to work out which chips need replacing. I started harvesting them from this old server board here, which worked out really well, but the old MT257 chips just kept failing. I ended up going through this about 3 times before I gave up and just ended up replacing every single RAM chip on the board. Then once that was done, the system did this to me. The DMA controller had actually died, so then I ended up desoldering it, putting in a socket and installing a brand new NEC 8237A chip, and that seems to have taken care of business. Now unfortunately, because I was so frustrated with the machine by this point, I didn't actually record any of this, so there's no footage of this, but yeah. The machine's been running great since. Unfortunately, when that DMA controller failed, it did it while I was using Norton's Calibrate to change the drive interleave, and that left me with an unusable drive, which I had to do a fresh low-level format on and reinstall all of my software goodies. The other thing I did was install my little network program too, and that's running great. So I've got an 8-bit network card in here, so I can run all my games and all that sort of stuff on the system. So I think it's quite an interesting machine because it does run pretty quick. If I just run you check it now, one thing I want to mention, actually, the EGA card that I put in this. Now, EGA, to me, as far as video goes, is the biggest pain in the bum that I have ever dealt with. Hercules monochrome, shove it in, you know, set the switch on the motherboard maybe, plug in your monitor, you're good. CGA, same. VGA, same. EGA, they made these cards so they supported like a whole bunch of different monitors, they had different operating modes. I mean, here's one. You see all the switches on the back for the configuration, so you can see that. And there's another 2, I'm just holding these at random. There's 3 EGA cards that I pulled out, and not one of them defaulted to EGA mode, and because I was being impatient, I didn't want to look it up on the internet and find out what the switches were and stuff around with them, so I went through my parts box and found an ATI EGA Wonder 800 Plus, and I can't recommend it enough. You get a plug-and-play software utility that's absolutely fantastic. Lets you change the number of lines on the screen. You can toggle between EGA, CGA, and MDA modes. On an EGA display, you can hook up an MDA display if you'd rather. You can hook up CGA. It does auto detect, so auto detects what monitor you've got, and you can force it, and the tool, absolutely perfect. As far as EGA adapters go, ATI Wonder 800 Plus, big thumbs up from me. These things, not so much. I don't know. I was just kind of annoyed at how tricky that was. I get the feeling that in New Zealand there might have been a lot of people that had either EGA monochrome displays or Hercules monochrome, and they just bought those cards to just work with whatever monitor they had. Not completely sure. So we go utilities, we go check it. Using Direct Access 5.1 here, if you're wondering. And I still believe that this is the absolute best menu system. I use this on absolutely everything from my XTs up to 486s, any DOS-based PC. This menu system is awesome. It's easy to use. It's got, you can load a program by pressing a key, so you can set which key activates which programs. You've got multiple tiers. You can use the mouse if you like. It unloads between programs so it doesn't waste RAM, and it's quick on an XT. As far as I can say, that's as good as it gets. Also has usage logging, so if you want to make sure that your kids haven't been playing Commander Keen all day and they've been learning BASIC a little bit, winner winner chicken dinner. Okay, so let's have a look at this configuration. So 80286 XT machine, check it knows what's up. Base memory 639K, no extended, no expanded, EGA 1.2 meg 360K, 71 meg hard drive, 2 serial ports, and I didn't put in a parallel port because I didn't really need it. If I go to CMOS table, you'll see there's no CMOS, this isn't an AT. And we'll do benchmarks. Now when I had the disk cache ROM enabled on this particular system, running this test would actually crash the machine, and I have no idea why. It doesn't make sense because it's not even a disk thing. There we are. Did you see that? 80286, 10 megahertz, and I did check, the crystal is a 20 megahertz crystal. It is running the system at 10 megahertz. I also get the feeling the ISA bus has also been run at 10 megahertz, although I haven't actually checked that on a scope. And you can see here we are 6.88 times the speed of an IBM PC XT, and for math we're almost at 6 times the IBM PC XT, which is pretty awesome. As for games, got a large variety of all your usuals here. Test Drive was the one that I've been enjoying the most of on this machine. Now that I worked out the issues with Test Drive and the keyboard interface, it's much more tolerable. The PC speaker's got a very deep note to it, which is quite nice, and it is very loud. It's actually quite a sizable speaker, so that gets a thumbs up from me. And this game is perfectly tolerable on this machine. I also did my Jill of the Jungle test, and I found that was just as laggy as the Model 3286, but if this was your dad's computer and you were 14, you would have played it. So it's not bad, it's tolerable, tolerable. Games like Commander Keen, the Sierra adventure games, that stuff all runs absolutely ace. So guys, I'm going to go for a drive. Catch you guys next time. Thanks heaps. The next video should be, unless I get distracted again, the build. I'm putting an IBM 5161 expansion unit together. I'm just waiting on my cable to turn up from the US. I've got everything else that I need, and we're going to take a 5150 and expand it as far as we can, and I think that's going to be a hoot. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.